Usually when we talk about someone being like really smart, we immediately picture, I don't know, a supercomputer.
Right, yeah, like pure processing power.
Exactly. You give this person a complex problem and boom, the correct answer just immediately spits out. It's, the fastest hand in the air in math class.
Oh, for sure. We completely idolize that kind of rapid-fire intelligence, quick reflexes, really fast recall. It's all optimized for speed.
We really do. But stepping into the world of ancient psychological frameworks, that rapid-fire speed suddenly looks less like intelligence and more like, well, kind of a liability.
Yeah, which shifts the goalposts completely, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
Because we're looking at a definition of wisdom today that is essentially about hitting the brakes. Like,
Yeah.
it is the absolute definition of a mental yellow light.
And we aren't just talking about, abstract philosophy here. We're decoding something called the Buddhi-Carita, which roughly translates to the wise or intelligent temperament.
Right.
So we're looking at what it truly means to have a mind that's naturally inclined toward wisdom, how that actually manifests mechanically, and, the specific daily habits used to build it.
Welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission is to unpack this exact framework. And just to set the stage, our source material for this deep dive is Chapter 5 of a book written by Reverend Thalanguli Ratanathero.
And I have to say, the insights in this chapter are just incredibly actionable.
Oh, totally. By the time we wrap up today, you will have a mental toolkit for turning even a ringing phone or, I don't know, just a glance in your bathroom mirror into a moment of profound clarity.
Which is a toolkit I think we could probably all use a bit more of, especially in a world that's so, optimized for instant reaction.
Definitely. But before we get to those life hacks, we really have to accurately define what this wise temperament actually is. And the framework throws a massive curveball right out of the gate.
Oh, it really does.
Because it turns out the wise temperament looks surprisingly similar to a completely different, much more destructive trait, which is anger.
Yeah, they compare the Buddhi-Carita, so the wise temperament, with the Dosa-Carita, which is the aversive or angry temperament. And outwardly, they share a really highly specific characteristic.
Which is what?
Both of them observe details meticulously, and they recognize faults instantly.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because on the surface, that sounds like completely identical. You have two people who walk into a room and instantly zero in on everything that's wrong.
Right, they both see it. But wrong might actually be the wrong word for how the wise person views it. What's fascinating here is that the difference is entirely in the execution and the internal weather of the person.
Internal weather, I like that.
Yeah, so the aversive person scans for threats and flaws because they take those flaws personally. They get irritated by them.
Oh, okay. So it's like the difference between the coworker who, hits reply all on a company-wide email just to loudly complain about a typo.
Oh, the worst kind of coworker.
Right.
Yeah.
Versus the editor who just quietly fixes the typo behind the scenes so the document actually succeeds.
That is a perfect analogy. The reply all coworker is criticizing out of pure irritation, right? The imperfection offends their ego. But the wise temperament recognizes that exact same imperfection, but they process it through a lens of wisdom and compassion.
So they're not just getting mad.
Exactly. They seek to understand the cause of the fault and figure out how to overcome it with wholesome effort. So, the angry person wants to punish the error, but the wise person just wants to resolve it.
So they aren't just ignoring the faults. It's not this, toxic positivity where you just pretend the typo doesn't exist or that everything is perfectly fine when it's not.
No, far from it. I mean, acknowledging reality is literally the first step of wisdom. The observation is identical between the two temperaments. It's the emotional reaction that completely diverges. The angry temperament reacts blindly, right? While the wise temperament pauses, observes the mechanics of the situation, and then acts deliberately.
So now that we have that internal mechanism pinned down, that it's really about pausing and seeking understanding over emotional validation, how does this actually manifest? Like when you evaluate your own habits, how do you know if you naturally lean toward this Buddhi-Carita?
Well, you look for general qualities like mindfulness, moderation, patience, and placing a really high value on good friendship. But honestly, the most defining characteristic is how a person handles life's inherent friction.
What do you mean by friction?
They are deeply aware of what the framework calls the unsatisfactory nature of existence.
Okay, I have to say, acknowledging that life is inherently unsatisfactory sounds a bit, gloomy for a so-called wise person. It sounds almost pessimistic.
I get that. And it would be gloomy if they just stopped there.
Right.
Someone with an aversive temperament gets bitter about life being hard. They feel victimized by the friction, you know? But the wise temperament uses that exact same awareness of friction as fuel. Yeah, they realize conditioned existence is flawed, so they use that understanding to progress toward liberation.
Yeah.
The difficulty literally becomes the path.
Wow. And externally, this translates into some very specific behaviors, right? Like calm speech, respectful interactions, a preference for thoughtful discussion over, a heated argument.
Yes, exactly.
But there is a physical hallmark mentioned here that really stands out to me. It says they keep things neat and orderly, but without excessive attachment. And that feels like a bit of a paradox.
How so?
Well, what if someone is just inherently a bit messy? Like, does having a cluttered desk disqualify them from being wise?
That's a great question. The text is pretty clear that these are general tendencies rather than, absolute indicators. But that phrase you mentioned, neat and orderly without excessive attachment, is actually kind of the secret sauce of the whole temperament.
Okay, explain that.
Think about someone who keeps an immaculate house, right? Everything is perfect. If a guest accidentally spills a drop of coffee on the rug and the host has an absolute meltdown.
Oh, I've seen that happen.
Right. That is neatness with attachment.
Ah, I see. Their ego is entirely tied to the state of the living room.
Precisely. Their identity is totally wrapped up in being the person with the perfect house. But the wise temperament, they care for their environment because order is conducive to a clear mind.
But if a mess happens?
If a mess happens, their ego isn't threatened. They just clean it up without the emotional drama because they don't identify with the rug.
The lack of attachment is the operative part there. That makes so much sense. And there's actually a list of self-reflection questions provided to help you gauge your own temperament.
Yeah, those are really revealing.
And while most of us are a mix, usually one leads. There were questions like, do you willingly accept constructive criticism? Do you admit your mistakes and actually learn from them?
And just answering yes to those requires bypassing a massive amount of ego defense.
Especially this one, which is, do you value truth more than praise? I mean, that requires brutal honesty with yourself. Or do you reflect on the consequences of your actions before speaking?
It really paints a picture of someone whose primary motivation is truth and understanding, rather than just seeking, emotional validation from everyone around them.
Because validation is just a craving.
Right.
And the wise temperament is fundamentally about dismantling cravings.
Exactly.
Which actually brings us to the most practical part of the deep dive. Let's say you take that mental quiz and you realize you lean a little more toward the angry critic than the wise editor.
Which a lot of us do, let's be honest.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
So how do you actively hack your own temperament to fix that? The framework starts with our most basic physical attachments, right? Food and the body.
Yeah. The recommended meditation practices here are designed to just cut right through our attachment to sensual pleasure, and it starts with the perception of the repulsiveness of food.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because, I hear you on reducing attachment, but viewing food merely as medicine to sustain the body and not for pleasure or indulgence at all.
It sounds intense, I know.
It sounds strictly utilitarian. There's a difference between a mindless sugar addiction and genuinely appreciating the culinary artistry of a really good chef. Does this framework make any room for appreciation, or is it just about killing the joy of a good meal entirely?
I mean, it's completely natural to resist this concept because we are heavily, heavily conditioned to seek comfort in food, right?
Yeah, food is love.
Exactly. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the objective isn't to hate food. You aren't supposed to suffer through a flavorless dinner. The actual goal is to free yourself from the suffering of craving, which is known as tanha.
Okay.
When we are overly attached to the taste of something, our happiness becomes incredibly fragile. It becomes entirely dependent on the chef, the quality of the ingredients, the temperature of the dish.
Yeah, if the soup comes out cold, my whole evening is suddenly ruined.
And that's suffering. So the practice involves very specific steps to break that fragility. You pause before taking a bite, take 3 slow breaths, and ask yourself, am I feeding the body or am I just feeding craving? And then while you're eating, you actively observe how quickly the pleasant taste disappears.
Yeah, the framework points out that each mouthful lasts only a few seconds.
Right. Once you swallow it, the pleasure is just gone. Nothing remains except the nourishment.
Wow.
So by observing that fleeting nature deeply, you replace a temporary, super fragile pleasure with a much deeper, more stable contentment. You appreciate the nourishment without becoming a slave to the craving for the very next bite.
Okay, I can see that. So conquering our craving for a good meal makes mechanical sense. But I feel like it's relatively easy to detach from a slice of cake compared to detaching from our own physical bodies.
Oh, definitely.
How do we take this same mechanical breakdown and apply it to our actual reflection in the mirror?
Well, they do that through the contemplation of the four great elements, which teaches that what we call my body is actually just a temporary combination of earth, water, fire, and air.
Okay, so we know the basics of those elements, right? Like earth is the solid parts, bones, muscle, water is blood and sweat, fire is digestion, body heat, air is movement and breath.
Yep, that's the breakdown.
But how does mapping those out actually change our daily psychology? Like, how does that help me?
Because it fundamentally alters your relationship with your own self-image. When you look in the mirror, instead of having that immediate knee-jerk thought of, oh, I am beautiful, or, ugh, I am ugly, you reflect instead, this is merely a temporary combination of natural elements.
Wait. If I look in the mirror and I just see earth, water, fire, and air, that completely bypasses the ego because you literally cannot feel insecure about fire or earth.
Exactly. You strip away the entire subjective narrative. It weakens the conceit of me and mine because you realize the elements don't actually belong to you.
They're just nature doing its thing.
Right, they are just nature temporarily hanging out in the shape of a human. And doing this develops immense equanimity, especially as the body starts aging or if you experience an illness.
Which perfectly sets up the next level. Because if the food and the elements practices detach us from physical cravings, the next step detaches us from the illusions of the mind itself.
Yeah, now we're getting to the core of it.
This is Vipassana, right?
Yeah.
Insight meditation.
Exactly. This is where we get into the deep mechanics of the wise temperament. And it's important to note that Vipassana isn't about trying to reach some blank, tranced out state of mind.
So no floating on clouds.
No, not at all. You aren't trying to change your experience. You are purely observing bodily and mental phenomena as they arise and pass away.
So you're just watching the machinery of the mind work without interfering at all.
Yep. And through that pure observation, you realize the three characteristics of existence. So first is anicca, meaning everything changes. Second is dukkha, meaning nothing provides lasting satisfaction. And third is anatta, meaning nothing is truly I, me, or mine.
Okay, anatta is the massive hurdle here. The framework breaks a person down into the 5 aggregates, which basically means you aren't a single solid entity. You are just a combination of 5 constantly changing processes.
Yeah, let's walk through them because the sequence really matters here. So first there is rupa, which is just your material form. Then vedana, which is feeling, but it's categorized purely as pleasant, painful, or neutral data.
So very basic.
Very basic. Then there's sana, which is perception or labeling. Next is sankhara, which are mental formations. Think complex thoughts, intentions, or anger. And finally, vijnana, which is consciousness or mere awareness.
Okay, I need a modern analogy for this because often you hear this compared to, like, a wave in the ocean. But a wave doesn't really explain the mechanics of how these aggregates trigger one another.
It is a bit abstract, yeah.
It feels much more like a smartphone notification to me. Can we trace it through that lens?
I love that. Let's trace it.
Okay, so rupa, the material form, is the physical vibration of the phone in my pocket, right?
Correct.
The vedana, the feeling, is that immediate pre-verbal spike of anxiety in my chest. It's just unpleasant data.
Right.
Sana, perception, is my brain labeling it, oh, that's a text from my boss. Sankhara, the mental formation, is the dread, the storytelling, the defensive thoughts about why I haven't finished that quarterly report.
Mm-hmm.
And vina is the consciousness tying it all together as the screen lights up.
That beautifully explains the mechanism. Notice how unbelievably fast that cascade happens, too. You usually just experience the final dread, the sankhara, and you think, oh, I am stressed. You totally identify with the final product of the assembly line.
Yeah, but if that's true, if I am not my feelings or my thoughts, if it's just this mechanical cascade of aggregates, then who exactly is feeling the anger when my boss texts me or when I get cut off in traffic?
This raises an important question, and the Deep Insight Reflections answer it perfectly. It says, there is feeling, but no owner of the feeling.
No owner of the feeling. Okay, that feels almost impossible to put into practice in the heat of the moment. Like when someone cuts me off, my blood pressure spikes, my hands grip the wheel. I definitely feel like I own that anger.
Right, but what's happening is you experience the Vedana, the unpleasant physical sensation, but claiming it as mine is an extra, entirely unnecessary step.
An extra step.
Yeah, there is seeing, but no seer. Thinking, but no thinker. When you get cut off in traffic, a mental formation of anger arises because of causes and conditions. But you don't have to claim it. You can just note, oh, anger is known.
And there are actually specific scripts provided in the text for this, like, when you are angry, you reflect. This is a conditioned mental state. If I do not feed it, it will pass.
Exactly.
Or when you're in pain, you say, pain is one thing, suffering comes from resistance.
And that distinction between pain and suffering is just profound. The physical sensation, the Vedana, is just data. The suffering only happens when the mind resists it and says, I don't want this.
Wow.
So when you observe it with patience without claiming ownership, the suffering actually diminishes, even if the pain remains.
Okay, so we've deconstructed the body into elements and the mind into this cascade of aggregates. It is brilliant psychological neuroplasticity. But how does a person with the Buddhi-Carita integrate this into, a normal busy Tuesday?
Right, the real-world application.
Yeah, like, does this work in a corporate environment? Or do you have to be sitting quietly in a room on a cushion?
It is actually built specifically for daily friction through the final practice, which is sati sampajana.
Which translates to mindfulness with clear comprehension.
Exactly. Mindfulness is knowing what is happening. Clear comprehension is knowing why we are doing it. Together, they take meditation entirely off the cushion and turn every single activity of your day into a practice.
And you apply this clear comprehension by asking 4 questions before taking action. And I really want to apply these to a modern scenario because this is where the rubber meets the road.
Let's do it.
Let's say I'm drafting a passive-aggressive email to a colleague who, just completely missed a deadline.
That is a perfect test case for the wise temperament. Let's run it through the filter. What's the first question?
Okay, question 1. Is this beneficial?
Well, if the email is just to vent your frustration, your sankhara, then no, it's really not beneficial to the project. It only serves to protect your own ego.
Yeah, true. Question 2. Is this the right time?
Even if the colleague genuinely needs correction, right? Doing it while you are experiencing the aggregate of anger means it's the wrong time. Your perception, or your sana, is clouded by irritation.
Fair enough. Question 3. Am I acting mindfully?
Are you aware of the tight chest? The shallow breathing, the desire to retaliate? Because if you are just reacting blindly to that feeling, you are not mindful, you're just on autopilot.
Ouch. Okay. And question 4. Will this reduce suffering?
Hitting send on a passive-aggressive email almost guarantees more friction, defensive replies, and more suffering for both of you. So the email basically fails all 4 tests.
It changes everything. It inserts that mental yellow light before you do any real damage. And the framework gives such great micro-triggers to practice this throughout the day, too.
Yeah, the little reminders are so helpful.
It suggests that whenever your phone rings, before you answer it, you take 1 mindful breath. Or just being fully aware of the physical sensation of turning a doorknob. Or, I love this one, when you sit down at your desk, literally just noting to yourself, I am sitting.
Right. And for the wise temperament, this is exactly how intellectual understanding transforms into direct experiential knowledge.
You're actually living it.
Yes, you aren't just reading about impermanence in a book. You are feeling it every single time you open a door or swallow a bite of food or choose not to send an angry email.
So what does this all mean? It means your entire life becomes a continuous laboratory for wisdom. You aren't just meditating for 20 minutes in the morning and then operating on autopilot for the rest of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
Cultivating the Buddhi-Carita, this wise temperament, isn't about being the fastest processor or the smartest person in the room. It's entirely about observing reality clearly, whether that's your food, your anger, or a ringing phone, and choosing understanding over an impulsive reaction.
And the long-term compounding interest of those tiny pauses is just massive. I actually want to leave you with a final thought to ponder today.
Okay, let's hear it.
If you started treating every moment of frustration, every annoyance, every slight as just a temporary shift in your 5 aggregates, how much lighter would your day be? Imagine the absolute freedom of realizing you don't have to own or identify with every single thought that pops into your head.
Wow, that is the liberating thought. You don't have to own the notification. You can just watch the screen light up and turn off again.
Beautifully said.
Well, that wraps up our exploration of the wise temperament. But the journey doesn't stop here. Make sure you join us for the next deep dive. where we will be exploring the next temperament and character of this fascinating framework. Until then, keep pausing, keep observing, and we'll catch you next time.